Jacob's Well, a popular swimming hole near Wimberley, will remain closed to swimmers for the foreseeable future.
The drone eased beneath the surface, its bright lamps carving a narrow path through the blue water of Jacob's Well. The first 30 feet looked serene, almost inviting. But this was not a recreational swim, and the machine was not headed for the open chamber where visitors float and laugh. It was being sent toward a restricted section of the system, a place tied to a grim record. At least 12 people have disappeared there, never to return. On monitors above ground, scientists watched the live feed as the drone dropped into tight, winding corridors that divers have long warned about, passages so confining they've earned the nickname the Trap. The mission was meant to document and map the cave. Instead, the camera revealed something else, something that reinforced the site's reputation in the most disturbing way. Whispers around the well. In the rolling, sun-baked terrain of Texas Hill Country sits the town of Wimberley. Just beyond it, Cypress Creek runs over limestone, and in that creek bed is a perfectly round opening, dark, sharply defined, about 12 feet across, set in otherwise calm, shallow water. This is Jacob's Well. On hot days, the scene above the opening feels like a celebration. Families, students, and visitors line the rocks and take turns jumping into water so clear it seems unreal. The spring stays cold year-round, about 68 degrees Fahrenheit, creating the impression of a dependable, refreshing oasis. But that surface picture hides what Jacob's Well actually is. Most people only experience the first chamber, a sunlit room roughly 30 feet deep, where the bottom is visible and the water seems harmless. Yet the opening is not simply a well in the everyday sense. It is a karst spring, the mouth of a vertical cave system that drops into darkness and connects to the Trinity Aquifer. For swimmers, the adventure ends in that first room. For divers, it begins. In cave diving circles, Jacob's Well has a reputation that is both famous and feared. It is often described as a diver's grave, not because it looks threatening from above, but because the interior is shaped like an almost ideal natural trap. The known system contains at least 4 chambers, each deeper and more hazardous than the last. Between them are narrow, twisting passages that divers have named in ways that sound less like geography and more like caution signs. To move from the second chamber to the third, divers must pass through a constriction so tight it has been nicknamed the birth canal. Farther in, other areas carry names like the coffin and the final squeeze. The danger is not only the narrowness, it's the way the environment can change in an instant. Much of the deeper floor is not solid rock. It's coated in a fine, powdery limestone silt. One careless fin kick, one brush against the bottom, can lift that silt into the water and erase visibility immediately. Divers call it a silt out. In the resulting darkness, orientation can vanish within seconds. A diver may be unable to see gauges, a compass, a partner, or most importantly, the guideline that leads back to the surface, assuming one has been laid. That is where panic becomes lethal. A frightened diver breathes faster, burning air at a rapid rate. If the exit line is lost or never placed, the situation can collapse quickly into disorientation, exhaustion, and then suffocation. Over time, at least 12 people have died in the passages of Jacob's Well. In many cases, recovery has been considered impossible, either because bodies are too deep or because the tunnels are too unstable to safely enter. The cave becomes a permanent tomb. The result has been a cycle of tragedy and fascination. The well's depth, its restricted passages, and the challenge of reaching what lies beyond have repeatedly drawn divers, especially younger, ambitious ones, who want to go farther than anyone else and come back with proof. Eventually, the losses became so severe that local authorities attempted to end the danger by sealing the entrance to the deeper system. A heavy metal grate, thick rebar welded into a grid, was placed over the opening leading to the more dangerous chambers below. The goal was finality. It didn't hold. Time after time, divers returned under cover of darkness with bolt cutters and broke through the barrier to reach the forbidden passages. The site refused to stay closed, not because the metal wasn't strong, but because the drive to go deeper was stronger. This is where researchers became involved, because Jacob's Well is not only a hazardous cave, it is a significant geological feature. It is the primary source feeding Cypress Creek and a direct window into the Trinity Aquifer, an underground water system that supplies drinking water to millions. Scientists wanted answers. How did these passages form? How deep was the system? And what conditions inside made it so uniquely dangerous? After so many deaths, putting another diver into the deepest sections was considered unacceptable. The risk was simply too great, so the team turned to technology. They chose an advanced, remotely operated vehicle, an underwater drone, built to go where a human might not safely return. The plan was to explore and map the deepest known parts of the well, including the areas most feared by divers. The researchers believed they were preparing to complete the first comprehensive survey of the cave. They did not expect the mission to intersect with a decades-old tragedy. What the drone encountered was not just geology, it was a burial place. The camera's disturbing discovery. On a clear, calm morning, researchers and geologists assembled at Jacob's Well. The mood was focused and tense. This was not a routine field day. Nearby, a white van idled with electronics running inside. Its open side doors revealed multiple high-definition monitors, a mobile control center for the operation. The vehicle at the heart of the mission was small, bright yellow, and bluntly functional. It was called Explorer. This was not a consumer gadget. It was an industrial-grade ROV designed for harsh conditions, built to withstand pressure, equipped with multiple high-resolution cameras, powerful forward lights, and sonar systems capable of mapping walls in darkness. A thick fiber optic cable ran from the drone back to the van, acting as both tether and data line, delivering a stable, live feed to the operators. The objective was straightforward: lower the ROV into the well, descend to the fourth chamber, and use sonar to generate the first 3D map of the system. A technician eased Explorer into the well's 12-foot wide opening. On the monitors, the image filled with blue as the drone's thrusters began to work and the descent started. The first chamber appeared almost peaceful. The drone dropped about 30 feet into a sunlit space where Texas daylight still reached the rock walls. Light rippled through the water, and the room looked open and inviting. Then the operator angled the ROV forward and guided it down a sloping path into the next chamber. The video shifted from bright blue to darker shades. By roughly 80 feet down, natural light had disappeared. The drone's lamps switched on, projecting a clean cone of illumination into blackness. The walls were pale limestone, smooth and carved by long periods of flowing water. Soon, Explorer reached one of the system's most infamous constrictions, the birth canal, the tight passage leading toward the third chamber. Sonar confirmed what divers already knew. The corridor was narrow, barely wide enough for the machine. But the danger wasn't only the walls. The floor was loose gravel, and disturbing it could cloud the water. The operator reduced thrust, carefully coaxing the ROV forward to avoid stirring silt. Minutes later, Explorer cleared the constriction and entered the third chamber, wider, dark, quiet, almost like a holding space. The team paused to confirm stability and check the drone's systems. Then came the critical move. The operator aimed Explorer toward a small, dark fissure at the far end of the chamber. This was the entrance to the fourth chamber, the point that many divers considered beyond safe return. The drone pushed into the tunnel. The walls closed in immediately. The floor below was a shifting mix of rock and silt. This was a place few humans had seen in decades. As Explorer moved forward, its light suddenly caught a reflection, something that didn't match limestone. The operator halted and zoomed in. The team fell silent. In the beam, unmistakable, was a scuba fin protruding from gravel. A heavy stillness settled in the van. The camera panned slowly. A short distance away lay another object, an old oxygen tank, corroded and half buried, its regulator crusted over. Nearby, a torn piece of a black wetsuit snagged on rock. And then, the drone revealed what those objects implied. Partially pinned in a crevice, held by shifting gravel, were skeletal human remains. At that moment, the mission changed. This was no longer purely a geological survey. It had become a recovery operation conducted by a robot in a place humans could not safely enter. Explorer held position, lights steady, illuminating the silent space where the diver had been trapped. The equipment looked dated, from another period in diving history. On the remains of the wetsuit, a small, faded name tag was still barely visible. The operator adjusted the camera, trying to capture the clearest image possible. With digital enhancement in the van, letters began to resolve. The tag read, Kent Min. The name landed like a shock. This was not simply an unidentified diver. Kent Min was widely known in the story of Jacob's Well, associated with one of the most infamous incidents in the site's history. He had vanished in this very area decades earlier, in 1979. For years, friends, relatives, and the diving community had wondered what happened in his final moments. Now the footage placed those moments on a screen. What made the discovery so unsettling was what it demonstrated. The tunnel was extremely narrow, and the bottom was not stable rock, it was a deep bed of loose gravel. Kent had not merely become trapped by tight space. The scene suggested the cave itself had buried him. The gravel could shift with minimal disturbance. It could slide and settle, pinning a body in place. Then the drone's lights swept farther and found more. Another set of tanks. Another fin. Kent had not been the only one there. The team realized the implication. This space held multiple lost divers. The drone was not documenting a single fatality. It had entered a mass grave, an area that contained the unresolved outcomes of more than one expedition. The footage offered a harsh clarity about the fourth chamber. The final squeeze was not merely a difficult passage. It was a deadly environment made of unstable rock, capable of shifting and trapping anything that entered. Until then, much of what people believed about the deepest chamber came from stories and hand-drawn diagrams by the few who had escaped. Now there was direct visual evidence. The well was not only confusing, it was actively dangerous in a way that could feel almost deliberate, because the terrain itself moved. Who Kent Mopin was, and why he descended. To understand what the drone encountered, it helps to return to the moment Jacob's Well took Kent, and to a specific date, September 9th, 1979. At that time, cave diving culture operated with fewer protections and fewer standardized practices than today. It was still a frontier, and many divers approached it with a mix of experience, confidence, and risk tolerance that now reads as alarming in hindsight. Jacob's Well was one of the most coveted challenges. Kent Mopin was part of that world. He was young, experienced, and described by those who knew him as fearless. He was drawn repeatedly to Jacob's Well and had entered it many times. But like others, he was captivated by the idea of the fourth chamber, the system's deepest known frontier, attempted by many and reached by few. That night, Kent and his friend Mark Brasher decided they would try to reach it. Mark was a college student at San Jacinto College, adventurous, eager, and influenced by Kent's greater experience. They were not alone. They were camping with a larger group, 8 divers from Pasadena, gathered near the well. The mood was excited, charged with the kind of energy that often precedes a risky mission. As night settled, Kent, Mark, and several others prepared their gear. They understood the well's reputation. People had already died there. But the pull of the unknown, of being the one to go farther, can override caution. Their target was clear: reach the fourth chamber. What became critical, however, was what they did not bring and what they did not do. They carried no extra lights. They had no safety ropes. They did not run a guideline into the cave, the single most important tool for finding an exit in a system where visibility can vanish. The plan appears to have relied on confidence and the belief that they could simply navigate back the way they came. It was a decision that left no margin for error. A diver in their group, identified as Joe, was in the water with them. He watched Kent and Mark descend through the first chamber and into the second. He followed as they moved through the birth canal and entered the third chamber. Then, something happened that Joe did not expect. Kent and Mark swam to the small dark opening at the far end of the third chamber, the entrance to the fourth. Joe watched them pause. Then, in growing alarm, he saw them begin pushing their heavy steel tanks ahead of them, forcing their bodies into the narrow passage. Joe had not been told they intended to go that far. Kent slipped into the darkness. Mark followed directly behind him. Joe stayed at the entrance, suddenly feeling the situation shift from daring to dangerous. He swung his dive light back and forth, urgently trying to get Mark's attention. Mark did not turn. Joe checked his own air supply. It was low, and he was deep. He was forced into a choice: stay and risk his own life, or retreat and seek help. He tried one more warning. He struck his diver's knife against his tank, sharp metallic clangs that function as an unmistakable underwater signal. It is a universal way to demand attention and communicate danger. No response came back, only silence from the tunnel. With his air dropping and his depth already risky, Joe held his light on the passage as long as he could, hoping it would serve as a beacon, something Kent and Mark might see and use to guide themselves back. Then, survival forced his hand. He turned and began to ascend. As he rose, the water around him changed. The clear visibility collapsed into cloudiness. The well became opaque. It was a silt out. Whether caused by a frantic movement, an accidental kick, or the gravel bed shifting under disturbance, the effect was the same. Visibility dropped to zero. And years later, the drone footage would reinforce a critical point: the gravel itself was unstable, capable of sliding and stirring into the water. When Joe reached the surface, he was breathing hard. He looked around and realized he was alone. He shouted for help, already understanding what the absence likely meant. The quiet night broke into urgency. Sirens arrived. A police officer contacted Don Dibble, the owner of a local dive shop and a highly trained former Navy diver, widely regarded as one of the best deep-water rescuers in the state. The odds of finding Kent and Mark alive were slim, but Dibble and his team responded without delay. Along with his partner Paul Battaglia and 2 other volunteers, he collected equipment and drove to the site. When they arrived, they found the remaining divers shaken and exhausted. One reported that he had briefly attempted to enter the passage and believed he saw something inside, shapes that appeared like bodies already partly covered by fresh gravel that had slid down in the tunnel. Dibble approached the well's dark opening. At night, it looked less like a spring and more like a doorway into another environment entirely. He made a professional decision that was difficult but logical. It was too dark, too silty, and too dangerous to send divers in immediately. They would wait for daylight. They arrived prepared for a recovery. They did not realize the well was about to claim another victim, entombed in shifting gravel. The next morning at Jacob's Well carried a different mood, focused, grim, and determined. Don Dibble's recovery team returned with the intention not only to locate Kent and Mark, but to bring them out. Around 10 a.m., divers entered the water. Some carried small garden trowels, simple tools for an impossible task. Inside the cave, at the passage leading to the 4th chamber, they found what the drone would document decades later: a wall of loose, shifting gravel. They began clearing it by hand, one small scoop at a time. But the gravel behaved like a living slope. Each handful removed caused more to slide down from above, refilling the space. Progress collapsed as quickly as it was made. It was like trying to dig through dry sand underwater, in darkness, while the environment continuously rearranged itself. Reports from inside became conflicting and increasingly alarmed. Hearing this, Dibble made a decision only a leader could make. He would go in himself. He was the most experienced diver on site, and he refused to ask his team to attempt something he would not do. He geared up and entered the water with a game warden named Calvin Turner, who accompanied him for support and safety. They descended into the cold spring water. They staged extra air tanks at approximately 25 feet and 75 feet, standard procedure for a deep, complex operation. They ran safety lines. Deep inside the cave, at the entrance to the fatal passage, Dibble stopped to check his pressure gauge. At roughly 1,100 pounds per square inch at that depth, combined with the heavy exertion he was about to undertake, he estimated he had about 10 minutes of usable time. 10 minutes to reach the lost divers and return. He signaled Turner, who stayed at the entrance. Then, Dibble pushed his head and shoulders into the opening. He held the safety line in one hand and his light in the other. In front of him was a sloped wall of gravel. He pressed forward, trying to clear enough space to move through. And then, without warning, the entire pile collapsed. A surge of rock and silt poured down and pinned him at the entrance. His arms and body were trapped. The water turned instantly from clear to zero visibility. He was inside a silt out, immobilized in total darkness. He could not move. He could not strike his tank to signal. He was effectively buried underwater. He struggled. His breathing accelerated, fast, shallow, loud inside his mask. With every breath, he burned precious air. His consciousness began to fade. In that moment, Dibble made a quiet, frightening decision. He accepted the possibility that he would die there, as the men he had come to retrieve likely had. He tried not to panic. He considered ending it quickly by inhaling water. Instead, he opened his mouth and swallowed the silty water in large gulps, preparing himself for the end. Then something unexpected happened. His body reacted with a powerful involuntary movement, an intense survival reflex. The sudden jerk shifted him just enough to loosen the gravel's grip. His mask had filled with water, but as he gasped, he saw a light. Calvin Turner had noticed the clouding and entered the passage. He arrived holding out a spare regulator, an auxiliary airline. Dibble grabbed it, forced it into his mouth, and took a deep breath. He was alive. But the crisis wasn't over. In the panic and swallowing, Dibble had ingested a significant amount of air, swelling his stomach. As he and Turner ascended, pressure dropped, and the trapped air expanded inside him, like a balloon inflating as it rises. He tried to release the air, but could not. The pain became severe and constant. He understood he was now in a different kind of race. Rising too slowly could allow the expanding air to cause an embolism, which can be fatal. He needed to surface quickly. When he clawed out of the water, his abdomen was grotesquely distended, described later as if he were, bluntly, far along in pregnancy. He tore the regulator away and screamed from the pain. The agony continued for 12 hours. He was rushed to Brooke Army Medical Center. At first, doctors suspected decompression sickness and placed him in a recompression chamber. The treatment did not relieve the pain. X-rays were ordered. They revealed the actual injury. His stomach wall had ruptured internally. The rupture led to peritonitis, a serious infection. A surgeon later described the operation as cutting into something like an inflated ball, underscoring how extreme and unusual the condition was. It was described as the kind of injury that is extraordinarily rare. Dibble survived. While he fought for his life in the hospital, the recovery effort for Kent and Mark continued. Another expert, Don Broad, was brought in. He entered the well and saw something that confirmed how far the missing divers had gone. A dive light Kent had dropped was still glowing in the darkness. Broad reached the corridor filled with gravel and recognized the situation immediately. He told the families the only possible method would be to remove the gravel from the top down. The families hired a commercial diving operation, Schaefer Diving Company. They brought in a recompression chamber and an industrial suction hose. For days, they attempted to remove tons of gravel from roughly 60 feet down and deposit it into the creek, but the system fought back. Every time they cleared a section, more gravel slid in to replace it. The well refilled itself. Eventually, money ran out, and the danger remained constant. A final assessment team from Brown and Root examined the situation and reached the same conclusion: the risk was too high. The passage was a moving, unstable grave. 12 days after Kent Mopin and Mark Brasher disappeared, the effort was officially ended. The most reasonable course was to leave them where they were. The well was sealed again, this time more permanently, with concrete and a grate intended to stop anyone from attempting the descent in the future. The fatal gravel bed, as it came to be known, had won. The entrance was closed. But the legends were only beginning. A passage beneath the water. The Explorer drone footage accomplished something remarkable. It clarified the physical mechanics of what happened to Kent Min. It showed the world that the fourth chamber contains a deadly, unstable gravel trap capable of burying divers in narrow passages. The scientists who watched the footage were shaken by what it revealed in concrete terms. But the images did not end the broader fascination with Jacob's Well. For many people, the site's pull has never been only about its physical danger. For centuries, it has been surrounded by mystery, and it carries an atmosphere that many describe as unusual, an energy that encourages speculation. The drone's silent survey of the submerged grave only intensified long-standing theories. Some ask whether the well is more than a cave. One of the oldest stories is that Jacob's well is bottomless. For more than 100 years, locals claimed it had no end, that it dropped toward the Earth's core. The drone mapping suggested otherwise, documenting chambers and known routes. But supporters of the legend point to a limitation. The drone mapped the passages that were accessible and known. The system itself is described as honeycombed, complex, and potentially branching. They ask whether the fourth chamber is not an ending, but a kind of filter, concealing deeper routes that continue downward beyond what has been charted. Another widespread idea is that the well is, in some sense, alive. Details of the earliest stories have faded, but Jacob's Well is known to have been a sacred gathering place for Native American tribes, a vital source of water and life. Some people believe that history and meaning contribute to the site's unusual presence. They claim the well has a voice, a low-frequency hum that is sometimes felt more than heard. Others describe an almost hypnotic sensation in the depths, a feeling that pulls a diver to continue just a little farther around the next bend. In this view, silt-outs and gravel slides do not feel random. They feel intentional, like the system is defending itself or protecting its interior by trapping those who push too far. That belief leads to another theory, a creature. Some ask whether panic and poor visibility are the whole story, or whether divers have seen something else in the darkness. They point to reported shadows mentioned in early accounts, and they connect that to the Trinity Aquifer itself, which is immense, ancient, and largely unexplored. If the deep ocean contains species once thought impossible, animals adapted to darkness, pressure, and isolation, could an unknown life form exist in a deep aquifer system? The idea sounds extreme, but it persists because the environment is vast and not fully understood. Those who believe this theory suggest that whatever is down there might treat the well as territory, and that some divers may have encountered something they could not explain. Beyond that, some theories move into the realm of the metaphysical. There are claims that Jacob's Well is a vortex or an interdimensional portal, a high-energy location where boundaries between worlds are thinner than usual. In this interpretation, the well is not merely dangerous, it is a doorway. Whether Jacob's Well is best understood as a cursed place, a misunderstood natural feature, or a natural wonder stressed by human obsession remains an open question for many who are drawn to it. Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more mysteries.